Hello everyone and welcome to the 12th episode of the Heavensward Dungeon Lore series. In this series I hope to explain things you might not know about Final Fantasy XIV dungeons, as well as discuss their individual stories and lore. This episode's dungeon is the hard mode version of the lost city of Amdapor. On our last visit to the ancient city, it was soon after the glamour surrounding the place was dispelled following the calamity. The seal containing the powerful void scent Diabolos was broken, and the Seed Seer known as E. Sumi Yan requested that we correspond with the Seed Seers Raya O and Arun before the Warrior of Light left to explore the spore-covered city. We managed to uncover the secret cause of the rotting surroundings, resulting in us defeating Diabolos and driving him out of the city. Although Diabolos would later return during our excursion into the Void Ark and the famous Maki civilization, the city of Amdapor stood silent without further disturbance for a good amount of time. Sometime afterwards, the Warrior of Light finds themselves in the midst of Ishgar's plans to hold a peace conference with Vidofnir and the other dragons to finally move past the Dragonsong War. Before the proceedings, however, a young maid drugs the Warrior of Light and gives an impassioned speech about those lost in the war, and how the dragons must not be forgiven so easily. After a disastrous response from Emanalain, many attendants wind up injured, including Onawa, Emanalain's manservant. After some words and a solid punch from Thancred, we leave Emanalain and return to Emmerich and Foundation, who poses the idea of a grand melee bout between the Eorzean Alliance's finest. We search for Emanalain once more at Edmund's request, discovering he carried Onawa to the Fortemps Manor for urgent medical care. While the young lord wallows in his inability to make decisions due to his status, he eventually decides to go to Emmerich and speak his choice face to face. After hearing of Emmerich's resolves to move forward for the people of today, rather than for those we have lost, Emanalain signs himself up for the melee on the side of Ishgard. The Warrior of Light too takes Ishgard's side at Emmerich's request, and a grand battle begins at the Gates of Judgment. After a lengthy battle, the Warrior of Light and Rauban himself stand face to face in a single-person duel, of which the Warrior of Light comes out victorious. All in attendance seem heartened by the display, most of all Emanalain, heartened once again for the future. In Foundation we find Alphinaud awaiting us, and after some more discussion, the plans for the peace conference resume. At Falcon's Nest, Emmerich gives a speech about the mourning of the dead, and that although those wounds may not heal, it is the duty of the realm to give the children of the future no reason to have to fight and die, but instead to live. However, soon after the unveiling of the Mural of Peace, Nidhogg, in the form of the overtaken Estinian, descends from on high, striking a heavy blow to Vidofnir and splattering the mural with blood. The possessed dragon rages that a child of Race Velga would stoop to such a level as peace after the bloody history of the war, and warns of the final chorus of the dragons before transforming into the Great Worm and taking flight. This causes the gathered crowd to agree that with Nidhogg around, the war can never truly end. Afterwards we speak with Alphinaud about his thoughts and decisions, telling us that he is determined to save Estinian, before returning to Fortemps Manor to discuss with Tataru everything we have learned. After this, E. Sumi Yan has a second request for the Warrior of Light. After our clearing of the Void Scent, the Seed Seers entered the building with the intent of cleansing the odd spores and decaying plants. Soon after they entered, however, the elementals fled without warning, indicating something else of great power lies deeper within the city's buildings. We visit Raya O's center for the second time, and she assures us that while the initial darkness was banished without question, the second power lay dormant within the place until disturbed by the Seed Seers' presence. She asks that we visit Alphine outside the city gates once more to clear the disturbance, and Alphine warns us once more to mind our step within the place, as whatever causes the elementals to flee can never be a good indicator of safety. As we enter the city for the second time, the place still retains the decaying appearance, but rather than the spores present everywhere, the rain falls heavily instead. The first areas we encounter here contain many insect-like creatures, some remnants of the Wamura that infested the outer area of the place on our last visit. We break through a wall of eggs and defeat some larvae, after which gremlins open the nearby door. We head down onto the still standing fungi platforms until we reach 2 more sets of egg walls, and as we defeat them, the nearby Warmora dislodge themselves from the wall and attack the party. Afterwards we head through the archway and up to the Tower of White, where the Queen of the Remora awaits us. The Achamoth defends its territory, using its scales to unleash effects on the party. Psycho Squammer attacks a large area in front of the Achamoth, dealing heavy damage to any caught within. Neuro Squammer causes a duplicate of the party member to appear in place, but after a time these clones unleash a large attack similar to the Psycho Squammer seen earlier. They also remain for some time, so the party must try and face away when affected, as to avoid covering the entire arena with Squammer. Finally, Toxic Squammer is targeted on a single party member, who must avoid the chasing gas cloud. If not, the cloud explodes, leaving a large puddle of poisonous pollen on the floor. Upon defeat, we proceed straight into the Sanctum of Dreams, the tower where we once fought the captured Diabolos. We head down the walkway to the first platform where a Rift Dragon lands in front of the party. A thing to note in this area is that many enemies either appear to be Void Sent, or at least tainted by the Void, and thus seem to suffer weakness by light. By pulling the enemies over the light breaking through the roof onto the platforms, they become vastly weakened. Notably too is that many of this room's enemies are corpses from both Amdapor and Mark, indicating that much fighting was done even this deep into Amdapor territory during the war. After defeating a second Rift Dragon, the nearby door opens and we proceed to Dark Wings, experiencing a dramatic change in the architecture, going from the gloomy dark of the Sanctum of Dreams to the almost pure white walls within this place. Standing ahead of the party lies an enormous statue of a crowned lion, which on approach stirs and comes to life, once again defending the place from would-be intruders. The winged lion uses many magical abilities to weaken and exploit the weaknesses of the party. It unleashes ancient stone and arrow, placing concentrated puddles of magic around the arena floor. These must be stood upon to absorb the magic, and if not, the magic expands and explodes, damaging the party. Ancient Holy causes the lion to rise into the air and channel energy from an arcane sphere underneath itself, which must be destroyed to avoid the magic expanding. Finally, the creature uses Ancient Libra, bestowing upon the party a weakness to either wind or stone at random. When afflicted by these, absorbing the relevant magic will deal enormous damage if weak to it, and so the party must work together to absorb the opposite element. After this, we use the Stone of Transference to reach the Crystallum, where the very white aesthetic continues in the floors and walls. The creatures encountered here are yet more golems made by Amdapor, each of which come to life on approach. Light sprites also wander the corridors and must be defeated before proceeding. After descending to a third platform and defeating the mana pots there, the very walls of the place begin to stir, as we discover the secret weapon amongst the Amdapori golems. Kuribu, an angel-like statue armed with sword and shield, awakens, and a bright light materializes as it descends to the arena, preparing to defend the very bowels of the city. It is said that this golem was fashioned after one seen in a vision of another plane entirely, and was considered to be the antithesis of the Void Sent, a being of purest light to oppose their abyssal darkness. During the fight, the golem uses a myriad of healing spells upon itself. As an Amdapori construction, this is not too surprising. Regen places a puddle of light underneath the golem, healing it over time unless moved out of the effect. Cure 4 heals all around Kuribu, including the party, and the heal on Kuribu itself can be negated by having the whole group within its range. Cure 3 meanwhile simply heals the golem, and must be interrupted or stunned during its cast to avoid the effect. Decoy meanwhile summons an additional creature known as Puto, which heals the golem over time, but this creature can be defeated to prevent this. When Kuribu appears defeated, the golem instead revives, activating its second mode known as Reverse. In this form, all its abilities instead do heavy damage to the party while still healing itself. Cure 4 forces the party to move away from the golem, while Cure 3 targets 2 party members with large damaging puddles. Regen, meanwhile, places a damaging puddle underneath Karibu. Decoy, meanwhile, now calls forth a creature that tethers to the healing party member, damaging them and reducing their healing effects, but this can be passed on to another party member to assist. After Karibu falls a second time, it reverts to its healing form, but switches between the two intermittently. Finally, after the third time, the Karibu truly falls, trying to warn its long-gone masters to flee the city, and turns back to an inanimate stone statue. Returning to outside the city gates, we make our way back to Raya O as Izumi also arrives, and the latter requests we tell of the nature of what we found within the city. He is surprised to hear that the aggressor was a construct of Amdapori design, and ponders as to why the elementals might have fled, considering that they are not deemed enemies of the ancient place. Raya O deduces that even though the elementals are a neutral party, the constructs within may have seen them via their ethereal structure, and being that Void Sense 2 are highly etheric beings, coupled with the statue's senses being dulled over the years, the defense system activated and presumed that an invasion of the city was in progress. Izumi concludes that the War of the Magi must have been a terrifying prospect indeed, considering the weapons and beasts involved. He then turns to us and thanks us for removing the threat from the city once more, hoping to fully proceed with the process of cleansing the still decaying parts of the Amdapori capital. Yet another time the city was paid a visit was by expert scholars giving chase to a phantom fairy. Summoned haphazardly by Satoto, a tomberry of Nim, she hoped to find a memento of her father, who disappeared to Amdapor long ago to try and cure the Green Death from his daughter. While searching Amdapor Keep did not find any results, after Satoto summoned Lilac, or an incomplete version of her, the fairy fled to the lost city of Amdapor, while Satoto herself collapsed from a lack of ether. After obtaining permission to enter the place, the Warrior of Light, along with Alcazolka and Landonel, visit the place to chase down the adrift fairy creature. We find ourselves proceeding once more through the Crystallum, defeating yet more golems and sprites, defending the inner workings of the place. Upon reaching the Protectorate, the Phantom flees into the stationary Karibu, reawakening and darkening it. It fights similarly to our first encounter, using reverse to cause its healing spells to deal heavy damage. After defeating the golem once again, the Phantom dissipates. As we turn to leave, Eos guides us to look back again and we see a large red gem upon the floor. After collecting it, we regroup at Camp Tranquil, where our allies appear, Satoto included, who appears to be much healthier than before. She explains why her father left, and how after entering Amdapori territory he never returned, presumed to be dead because of the war. Alcazolka ponders if the fairy might have actually been acting deliberately, trying to show the group something, and the Warrior of Light pulls out the red gem found in the chamber. Alcazolka suggests we take it to Sarito Karito to have it examined, and Satoto thanks Landonel for his protection during her illness. We reach Sarito, who examines the stone, gasping as he proclaims it to be full of concentrated white magics, and Alka asks if it was possible Satoto's father sought one of these stones to bring home for his healing properties. Sarito comments that it would be entirely possible, as with the knowledge of Nim, many diseases could have been remedied with a stone, perhaps even that of the Green Death. He also notes that while incomplete fairies usually wander without aim, it's possible that the strong will carried by Satoto's father may have guided this one onto the stone, trying still to see Satoto cured. Both Satoto and Sarito then thank us and Alcazolka, both for recovering the stone and for seeing Satoto to safety once more, and Sarito vows to carry on her father's work of studying the gemstone, hoping to eventually find a cure for all the Tomberries still active in the world. And that's the end of the story and lore of the hard mode version of the lost city of Amdapor. The pinnacle of white magic history wrought within the very walls of the enormous towers. Although the danger within seemed innocuous, could the inspiration for his guardian's creation have something more significant to offer? As for Satoto, she reaches closure about her father, and discovers feelings for another Lalafell determined to save her, and as passionate for the Royal Marines of Nim as though they were still active today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy XIV lore, and I'll see you next time for Saw Kai.